All right, good morning. 55 years ago, environmental activists, organized labor, and policymakers gathered for the very first Earth Day in 1970, and through the tireless leadership of environmental activists like Dennis Hayes, U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin, and so many others, down to many of the people in this room today, Earth Day has become not just a day of celebration and education, but a critical day of action. And boy, that has never been more important than it is this year. As we celebrate Earth Day today, we do so with heavy hearts, mourning the loss of Pope Francis, who made clear in his encyclical that standing up for climate is not just critical because we love the planet. It's critical if you believe in the divine value of every single human being. And at this moment in time, it is so critical for us to honor that legacy of Pope Francis and to stand up even stronger than we have in the past in the face of the onslaughts against climate by this wild climate denier in the White House, Donald Trump. So I'm proud today to be here to talk a little about what we're doing to stand up to those risks and threats, to announce some bold new actions by the New York City Public Pension Funds, and to stand with 350 NYC, Fridays for the Future NYC, and New York Communities for Change to highlight the important work we've got to do to save our planet and our communities from the threats posed by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. Look, nonprofits and community groups and climate activists are under attack right now, from the Trump administration's freeze on congressionally approved greenhouse gas reduction fund grants to his attacks on the independence of our nation's colleges and universities, to his lawless and due process denying seizure of student activists, and on and on and on. We even anticipate today the possibility of an executive order that would strip nonprofit status from climate groups. We've got to stand up together to the growing threat of authoritarianism in every domain, and most certainly in climate action. So today I'm going to run through what some of the threats Trump has posed on climate are and how they impact New York City. We're going to announce new efforts from our office's Bureau of Asset Management to confront the climate emergency and hold our asset managers accountable to net zero commitments. And then we're going to talk a little about some of the other threats that Donald Trump is posing as well, as we did last week when we looked at budget risks, and as we have been doing in this office since we released our Protecting NYC from the Threats of Trump 1 week after he was elected in November. Our office will be on the side of Pope Francis, on the side of climate activists, on the side of GGRF litigants, on the side of climate leaders in standing up to creeping authoritarianism and climate denial. So here's the run of show. This is essentially our weekly briefing. We did this last week when we looked at financial risks, and you can actually go on our website now and see all this information is collected at comptroller.nyc.gov/protectingnyc, going back to that first report we did in November, and moving through way too many articulations of risks and threats and what we can do since then. After we announce the pension step strategy, you'll hear from a couple of the climate activists in the room. I'll come back and talk about some of the other threats, and then we'll take questions from press if you have them. Okay, so as I said, Donald Trump is an existential threat to climate action the world over, all across the country, and right here in New York City. Trump and his allies are jeopardizing the health of our planet and our communities, and above all, our work to win a just and equitable transition away from fossil fuels in just 3 months. Trump has taken drastic steps to dismantle federal climate policies and reverse President Biden's progress on climate action. Trump has frozen or terminated billions of dollars from climate grants that protect New York City from more severe and frequent floods, mitigate environmental pollution in our water, soil, and air, and transition us away from fossil fuels. Earlier this month, FEMA canceled its BRIC program, Building Resiliency in Communities, of which 300 million of the billion that he canceled was designated for New York City to critical flood protection for NYCHA, for public housing residents, to the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center, which is the core way that we get our produce and much of our food in New York City, and to the neighborhoods most devastated by Hurricane Ida, from central Queens and South Brooklyn to Harlem. Trump's EPA has frozen or terminated over 400 grants for nonprofits, including $30 million for New York City-based nonprofits. And his administration is systematically removing critical climate data that New York City relies on to inform our climate policies, our infrastructure design, our decarbonization strategy. That includes funding cuts for the National Climate Assessment, which provides private climate projections and analysis of economic, health, and environmental impacts of climate change, and they've removed mapping tools to identify environmental justice communities, climate and economic vulnerabilities, and energy insecurity. This is all data that activists like those in the room fought hard for years to make part of federal policy, to provide that data, to support communities in the work that we're doing, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that data is preserved and deployed. Even more so, on the next slide, the Trump administration has blocked states and local governments from tackling a just and equitable transition to a clean energy economy. Last week, Trump halted the construction of a New York offshore wind farm currently being built off the coast of Long Island that's meant to deliver clean energy to 500,000 homes in New York. He's revoked permits for the other New York offshore wind developments. And these actions not only jeopardize New York's clean energy goals under the CLCPA, but also the future of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, which is being developed as an offshore wind port for operations and for manufacturing. And this will not only deny our climate, the wind farms, but our economy, the 1,000 jobs, good green jobs, that are anticipated to be created there. Trump is attacking energy affordability as well. DOGE laid off the entire staff overseeing the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, which helped 1.2 million New Yorkers pay for their heating and cooling bills last year. These are low-income households who rely on LIHEAP, who now no longer have a staff to enroll, to change, to make sure they're getting those benefits. So it remains unclear whether or how New York will be able to access the $360 million in LIHEAP funding that the state's entitled to for 2025. As we all know, 2024 was the hottest year on record, and unfortunately there's every reason to believe 2025 will be as well. New York's most vulnerable community members need this support to avoid heat strokes, health complications, and even death. Donald Trump and his administration are beholden to fossil fuel interests and not to the lives of Americans and New Yorkers. By declaring a national energy emergency to expand fossil fuel infrastructure and attempting to nullify state-level climate policies like New York's Climate Superfund Act, Trump has put the profits of fossil fuel interests over the future of our planet and the health of our families. There's also big threats on the horizon. Like, everyone is on tenterhooks today, waiting to see what he's going to post on Truth Social or what executive order might be released from the White House. He's signaled his willingness to revoke the nonprofit status of any nonprofit that does climate change work, like all those groups in the room of volunteers showing up week after week after week. A clear attack on anyone who he sees as an opponent. Let's be clear, environmental justice organizations play a crucial role in protecting the health of the planet, and there is no doubt that this is public interest, community-serving work, and we cannot allow its weaponization by having nonprofit status stripped. The IRS has long recognized that organizations engaging in this work qualify for tax exemptions under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. We're not going to let that be removed even under an authoritarian president. That executive order would be unconstitutional. The president can't strip an organization's tax status away just because he's capriciously angry it's Earth Day, or because he doesn't like the actions that you stand for. It runs counter to core constitutional principles of free speech, of equal protection, of due process, and we will be pushing back hard. I want in that vein to praise the efforts of climate groups around the country who are already doing just that. Both climate groups and states and attorneys general and some other cities are busy fighting back in court using the 10th Amendment, standing up for due process and constitutional rights. These latest court victories demonstrate that there is so much we can do to fight back against this lawless president. A judge ordered the Trump administration to unfreeze both the IIJA, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act funding, and the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Funds, to state governments in response to a lawsuit filed by a coalition of attorneys general, very much including our own New York State Attorney General Letitia James. The DC Court of Appeals ordered the EPA and Citibank to release $20 billion of greenhouse gas reduction funds for clean energy investments. And a judge ordered 5 federal agencies to unfreeze environmental and infrastructure grants awarded to nonprofits. So let's be clear. When cities and states and climate activists and nonprofits stand up and fight, we can prevail in court against these lawless executive orders. So even as we spend Climate Day mourning Pope Francis, even as we worry about what Trump is going to do, it's an important Earth Day to celebrate the strength of climate action, to show that when we organize together, when we stand up, when we push forward, we can make progress. It is a critical Earth Day to be clear-eyed on the risks and resolute about progress. And that's why I am proud today to talk about how we are resolute at progress here in the New York City Comptroller's Office, and in particular with our biggest asset, which is New York City's pension funds. You know, we often talk about the fact that most of New York's emissions are from its buildings, unlike other places around the country where most emissions come from transportation, and that's why it's important to be pushing forward with Local Law 97. At the Comptroller's Office, most of our emissions come from the city's pension funds. That's $270+ billion invested in companies all across the global economy. And even though we have divested from fossil fuels, when you invest in companies all across the globe, that's where your greatest emissions are. And that's why we have taken the boldest actions of any large public pension fund in the United States to become net zero and put forward a bold decarbonization program. And with our climate denialist in chief trying to mar this Earth Day, I'm proud to say we're taking our next bold step forward today. So let me just set the stage here. When I took office in 2022, I proposed, and 3 of our pension boards adopted, the boldest net zero implementation plan of any U.S. public pension fund. That plan included building on the divestment of fossil fuels for fossil fuel reserve owners in our public equities, with strong action to achieve net zero emissions by 2040, the most ambitious goal of any large public pension fund in the United States. To get there, we committed to disclose our emissions across scopes 1, 2, and 3, going further than any other pension fund to include scope 3 in that announcement, in those disclosures. We included strategic engagement with the companies we invest in, like the successful campaigns we did last year at major North American banks, which finally forced JP Morgan Chase to disclose the ratio of fossil fuel lending and investments to clean energy lending and investments. Our commitments include dramatically scaling up our investments in renewable energy and climate solutions, which are now over $11 billion and growing to $35 billion. And our commitment includes divesting where other strategies don't work to reduce climate risk. Last month, I'm pleased to say, we announced that the 3 New York City pension funds with net zero goals collectively achieved a 37% reduction in emissions since 2019. achieving their 2025 targets 1 year ahead of schedule, well on our path to being net zero by 2040, a real testament to the strategy that we adopted in 2022. And now we're stepping up to take our next bold step here. Our plan already called on our public markets asset managers to submit net zero plans to us by June 30th of this year. We let them know in 2022 that by June 30th, 2025, we expected to see their net zero plans. Today, I'm announcing the strong standards that we will be using to evaluate those plans and making clear, both with this public announcement and in a letter that we sent to all our public markets asset managers this morning, that if they don't submit plans by June 30th, as we have demanded, or if their plans don't meet the standards that we're promulgating today, then we will recommend to the pension fund boards that we put their investment mandates out to bid and find asset managers who will live up to the standards that we're adopting. All right, so as you can see, that's a popular, oh, here's the slide about the reductions, though. You could clap for the reductions also. This is our 37% reductions. You can see that we have from when we started measuring in 2019 through 2024, and we've got 3 funds here. So I think this is for NYCers, and you can see that we're down 41%, a little better than 37%. The average across the 3 funds is a 37% reduction from our 2019 numbers through June 30th of 2024. I think if you click through, you'll see BRRRRs and, oh, no, all right, good. Okay, so that's the 37% reductions. And again, what all of this shows is that we are clear that climate risk is financial risk, and that what's consistent with our fiduciary duty is attending to the risks we face all across our portfolio. We've taken some steps forward this year in private markets, committing to exclude, we already were committed to exclude upstream fossil fuel infrastructure. We're moving forward with a policy to exclude midstream and downstream fossil fuel infrastructure from our private markets investments. And today we're announcing and clarifying expectations for our asset managers, both for themselves and for the portfolio companies that they hold for us in our portfolio. So the expectations for our asset managers are clear, and they are: 1, to engage the portfolio companies they hold on our behalf to drive real world, real economy decarbonization, not just crafting a portfolio to make it look like it, but actually pushing for real world reductions. Number 2, to incorporate material climate related risks and opportunities in our investment decision making. Maybe biggest example here is utility companies, of which we have a lot in our portfolio, as we've seen in the wildfires in California, some of which have been caused by utility lines. It's not only a question of how utilities are sourcing their power, it's the risks posed due to increased fires and other climate catastrophes. And third, we want them to ensure a robust and systemic stewardship strategy that makes sure that when they're lobbying, when they're spending dollars, when they're spending capital money, that they're staying aligned with their climate commitment. So it doesn't work to say over here, we're committed to net zero, and then over here, spend money on lobbying against climate policy, and we need to see that in their plans as well. So that's the commitments at the asset manager level. And then today we are also detailing that these asset managers, just so, I mean, I know not everyone in the room is an investment professional. We take the $270 billion that we've got here, that is the retirement security of teachers and cops and firefighters and school crossing guards and public hospital nurses. We bid it out essentially to about 300 asset managers. Those are investment professionals, big companies who then invest that money in different kinds of companies. Some of them specialize, as in infrastructure. In our public markets, that's mostly that they invested broadly in publicly traded companies. We don't have mutual funds that we buy, but you can think of it a little like that. They take a big chunk of our money and invest it in a wide range of publicly traded companies depending on their strategy. And so what we need from them is both commitments about what they do as a company. What they do with our money was already clear. It was divested from fossil fuels a couple years ago. But we want to know what their policies are at the asset management fund level and have expectations for the portfolio companies that they invest our money in. And today we are setting the clear standards that we expect them to measure and report scopes 1 and 2, as well as material scope 3 emissions. If folks have questions afterwards about what falls into scopes 1, 2, and 3, I'll be happy to answer that. To set clear goals to reach net zero by decreasing their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and the inclusion of scope 3 emissions here is really critical. That is where 70% of emissions lie. To adopt a clear transition plan to achieve net zero, detailing how that company will meet its short, medium, and long-term climate goals, to align any capital expenditures and lobbying with their climate goals and targets. That's what I mentioned earlier. And to consider the impacts from transitioning to a lower carbon business model on workers and communities. This is sometimes what's called just transition, to make sure as you're making the transition that you're paying attention to its impacts on communities and on workers. So that is now the clearly promulgated set of standards that we have both for asset managers and for portfolio companies. And we are also making clear today that we are prepared to hold asset managers accountable to our net zero priorities. For any managers who either refuse to submit plans or submit plans that don't meet the standards that we've laid out, my office will recommend to the boards of TRS, of NYCERS, and of BRRS that we pull our pension funds away from asset managers who don't comply, that we put their mandates, that's called that's what we call their authority to manage funds on our behalf, that we beat out their mandates, and that as part of any new bidding process to onboard new asset managers, that we will be evaluating those managers' corporate level climate behavior and stewardship practices against our new standards as part of our due diligence process. All right, thank you guys all very much for that, and now you'll get to cheer for some of your own folks who have been working with us on moving toward this standard and these commitments. It is my pleasure first to call up Lena Hinkle, one of the founders of 350 NYC. Thank you, Lena.
My pleasure.
Okay,
Hey.
this is tall.
Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Happy Earth Day.
Yes. So great to see everybody, and what a great occasion to be here. So Dorian wanted me to speak today because I've been working in divestment and related stuff since 2012. And so I'm here to represent 350 NYC, but I'm also here to speak as a longtime New Yorker who cares about this amazing city and the planet. So we wanted to express our gratitude to Brad Landers for just for continuing to care for pension systems in a fiduciary manner, to protect the city workers who make the city what it is, and who have worked so hard to maintain dignity in their retirements. We're in a time of upheaval in our climate and in our consciousness. Corporations, Wall Street, and many elected officials have retreated from climate justice and their commitments. Asset managers have backed away from global warming pledges. Fables are being accepted as facts. And apparently there are still some folks who don't realize or won't acknowledge that climate risk is financial risk. Through this, Comptroller Lander has maintained steadfast stewardship, working on behalf of pensioners and advising the trustees to deliver a safe pension portfolio for city workers. And the Comptroller is now taking the necessary steps, as he just said, to hold asset managers accountable. Step up on climate action or risk being dumped. That's huge. Thank you. For me, today's announcement is more than the extraordinary commitment to keep the goal of net zero by 2040 alive, which is amazing. It's personal, as I'm sure it is to just about everybody in this room for various reasons. I grew up in Wyoming, in a small town, about 50,000 people. Spent a lot of time in the mountains and had the good fortune of being able to have the opportunity to develop a really strong relationship and love for the wildlife and nature. But my hometown, Casper, had a big oil refinery right on the edge of the town. So even as a small child, I had the, firsthand experience of, depending on which way the wind blew, really realizing firsthand the burning fossil fuels is toxic. I remember very clearly the horror that I felt when I saw, for the first time, an entire mountaintop removed because it was stripped, desecrated for coal. And that just stuck with me and made a big impact, and I just knew that there was a more sane way, and here we are. Still a long way to go, but we have made some really substantial progress, and this is one of the things, and it's really worth celebrating. Yes, yes. The city removed thermal coal in 2016 from its portfolio, divested from fossil fuels in public markets, recently committed to do the same in private markets, and now this. So bravo, Comptroller, for sending a message that actions have consequences. It's one of the last big puzzle pieces in the process of reducing the pension portfolio's greenhouse gas emissions, and it also sets an example that we hope others will follow, and it will spur decarbonization in the broader market, broader economy. Anyway, we want to thank Comptroller Lander dearly and his staff for continuing to show New York leadership. And huge thanks to the Coalition for all your committed work and persistence, perseverance, and love for our city. Thank you. And one more thing, just by the way, Wyoming, which is strewn now with abandoned coal mines and oil and gas wells, is today, it ranks as one of the top 10 states generating the highest percentage of electricity from wind power. So, onward. Onward. There's hope.
That's great, Lena. Thank you. Let me specifically shout out a couple of the staff who have worked very hard on this. John Adler, our Chief ESG Officer, and Louise Young, our Chief Climate Officer. Thanks to both of you guys for your hard work here. And I'll just say, in the same way that, Wyoming is shifting from oil and coal to wind, what we want to do with New York City's pension funds is shift to investing in renewables and climate solutions. That's why it's a comprehensive plan to disclose, to divest, to engage, and to scale up our investments in renewables. That's what transition looks like. Next up, we'll have two more folks from organizations here speak. Next is Rachel Rivera from New York Communities for Change.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, my name is Rachel Rivera. I am with New York Community for Change. I do live in Brownsville, and I am also a Sandy survivor. Please excuse me, I'm kind of nervous up here.
You're doing great.
A little story about me is about, 13, 14 years ago, Sandy hit New York. I still remember it like yesterday. That's why I'm shaking up here. My daughter still suffers PTSD to this day. She is 19, and she is a mother of one. My 11-year-old suffers from respiratory seizures. So when it's too hot, too cold, she'll catch a seizure, she'll stop breathing, and we have to administer CPR, mouth-to-mouth CPR. With that being said, it's hard for a parent like me on a minimum means to survive in a climate world. And this is what we are in a climate world. So I'm here, happily here, to let you know that I've been fighting big places like BlackRock, Wall Street, to let them know climate change is for real. And with that being said, we're here again. They provide the money for the climate, and we're here to let them know that Wall Street is with their money in their pockets, and we don't have money, but New York City does. So with New York City getting off getting the pension off the fossil fuels, we can make a change. With that, today Brad Lander is putting New York City's money where it's supposed to be with New Yorkers like myself. And I want to thank you for that. It's a big step. And that New York City does not need dirty money managers. We need cleaner managers. And, sorry. Again, please excuse me. I'm kind of nervous up here. So cities telling this Wall Street loud and clear, it is time to clean up your dirty act, or you will lose New York City's business. The city does not need dirty money managers. We need cleaner managers. The only way for them to listen is through their pockets. And we are affecting that today. We are doing something historically. Well, yes, we. And also you, Mr. Landers.
That's we.
We. And this is a historic moment because we've been fighting for so many years, and we are moving forward. And I want to thank you again for doing something very historic. And hopefully with New York being the first ones to do this, other states will also do it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. For our final speaker, we're going to hear from Keanu Aprels Josiah from Fridays for the Future NYC. There were a lot of beautiful things said over the last 36 hours about Pope Francis, but I have to say the one that I found the most powerful were the words by Bill McKibben, who really connected the dots between Pope Francis's commitment to combating the climate crisis with this just deeply powerful spiritual take on what it means to be a sacred human being on this planet. The only other person that he said he thought came close to matching Pope Francis's sort of symbolic power in that regard was Greta Thunberg, whose Fridays for the Future protests just like lit young people, inspired young people all across the planet to find new ways of stepping up at this critical moment, and that is the energy that we need to move forward if we're going to both honor Francis's legacy, but also combat the climate emergency that we now face in the form of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk. So I am delighted to be an ally of Fridays for the Future NYC and grateful for Keanu's partnership. Keanu, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keanu Arpels Josiah. I am a 19-year-old climate justice organizer with Fridays for Future NYC. Thank you for that really kind introduction. Not too long ago in September, we gathered here when Comptroller Lander announced a new policy regarding fossil fuel investments in private equity. That action committed to end our final direct investments with our city pension funds directly in fossil fuels by ending midstream, upstream, and downstream investments in fossil fuels. Remaining unacknowledged, however, was our continued funding and our collaboration with public asset managers, whether those like BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street or otherwise. One BlackRock fund, its Global Allocation Fund, has over $967.45 million invested in fossil fuels alone. In total, they have over $400 billion invested in the fossil fuel industry. A significant amount of those investments go straight to fossil fuel companies to develop new planet-killing, air-choking, and deadly projects. That includes the likes of Total Energies, Shell, BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Equinor. Vanguard, the world's biggest investor in fossil fuels, finances $413 billion in fossil fuel investments. 6,500 finance firms finance a total of $3.07 trillion in fossil fuels. That's more than the GDP of any country in the world. In a moment where, quite simply, we have two options: continued fossil fuel expansion at the expense of any semblance of a livable or just future, or to fight for action. Continued investment in fossil fuels is unthinkable. It's something the relatively conservative IEA in 2021 said we need to end immediately. Quite simply, we had to stop expanding fossil fuels yesterday. We had to stop expanding fossil fuels years ago. That's why the comptroller's announcement today is so critical. New York City's massive pension funds of over $270 billion should no longer invest in firms destroying our city's future. Under a fascist federal administration that repeats drill, baby, drill, who has taken billions of dollars to execute the fossil fuel oligarchy's bidding, New York City must stand up. And that's why this action is so important today. That's what this action is today. It's a critical commitment toward a true climate justice aligned pension fund, spurred by Republican states attorney generals, Republican state level actions, and our current administration. Asset managers like BlackRock have forsaken even the symbolic forms of climate action they have taken, such as joining the Net Zero Asset Managers Group, which BlackRock left in January. All this leaves our generation and our communities directionless and futureless. People are being deported from our streets, our schools. Climate justice organizers and social justice activists of all stripes are being called terrorists. Environmental protection after protection is being replaced with fossil fuel project after fossil fuel project. Climate disasters from Altadena to Maui, from Pakistan to New York, are raging. We are miles away from even having the conversations about the action to protect our communities that we must be taken. From the conversations. Even our own governor of New York is approving fossil fuel projects. All of this, however, from the name-calling to the deportations, from the funding cuts to the blatant attacks, show the fossil fuel oligarchs, this presidency, they're afraid of us. They are afraid of a united New York City fighting for our future. They're afraid of our generation, of our movements. Our work could not be more important. So that's why we're so thankful to Comptroller Lander, his whole team, for taking this critical, historic, monumental action. For today, on this, having our movements back, our generations back, and our cities back. Let's see this asset manager policy happen. Let's let the fossil fuel industry, the fascists, know we will fight, we will stand together until the future we deserve, the future we need is our reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keanu and Rachel and Lena. It was really great to have all of you here today. I just want to underline something that Keanu said that I think is important because, you know, part of what Trump is trying to do is get people to cave and cower. And we've seen that in so many different venues already, with the deportations, with the threats to universities, with the threats to law firms. And we've seen in each of those places some people buckle. And then we've seen some institutions stand up. You know, and I didn't know that I would be like praising Harvard University from the podium here, but what a difference it made when they said, you know, we have the resources, the power, the capacity to stand up and fight back. You know, we saw that when Cory Booker did his filibuster. You've seen that when some law firms like New York-based WilmerHale said no. And that is true in climate and investing as well. As Keanu said, too many asset managers seeing Donald Trump coming pulled out of the Climate Action 100 Plus or the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance. And you're seeing that with DEI as well, with folks like Bill Ackman and others getting investors to pull back. And I just want to make clear what we are doing today is keeping New York City and New York City's public pension funds on the side of the institutions who stand up and say, no, we are going to keep making progress on each of these issues. We stood with Reverend Sharpton and our Black and Latino asset managers to say, we're proud that we've grown asset management with Black, Latino, Asian, and women managers by 40%. Whatever happens in Washington, we are pushing forward. We've done that with, you could clap for that one too, that's good, we're, you know, all right. We've done that with affordable housing, even if they cut emergency housing vouchers. We've invested more of the pension funds in the preservation and creation of affordable housing than at any point in history, and we're going to keep pushing forward. Trump administration is shredding the National Labor Relations Board, but these funds have a tradition of having the backs of workers at Starbucks and Amazon and hotels, and we're going to keep pushing forward. And today we are making clear, even if Donald Trump issues climate-denying executive orders and tries to push investors to cower in fear, we are going to keep pushing forward. And that's what today's announcement represents. So thank you very much. We are now going to move on to some other non-climate threats that we're monitoring. And I know some people in the room have a rally to get to on the HEAT Act because I'm joining you at it in a few minutes. So if there are people that need to leave now to go to the HEAT Act protest, or because you have had enough of people listing all the threats that Donald Trump is causing to New York City, you're welcome to go now as we move on to talk about a few of the other threats that Trump is posing. That won't take too long, and we'll take questions right after that. Yeah, and I don't think any of this will take too long, so we'll just keep moving forward. All right. So, other threats we're monitoring, sadly, are quite a litany. The next one, do we have the next one? Yeah, is potential threats to other nonprofits. I mentioned the threats that seem to be coming today, or that are reported to possibly be coming today on climate nonprofits. Other nonprofits are already, unfortunately, facing very serious risks and threats. With recent attacks on universities and nonprofits, it's clear that the Trump administration is using every tool it can to silence dissent and threaten civil institutions. Both DOJ and congressional Republicans are seeking to weaponize federal funding and already targeting New York City-based nonprofits like the Vera Institute that has been aggressively targeted by DOJ, which first froze their funding. I mean, this was especially egregious. DOJ froze Vera's funding, and then having frozen Vera's funding so they weren't getting any, then said, because you're getting federal funding, which they had frozen, we now have the power to send DOJ into Vera. And just like they sent DOJ embeds into the VA and the US Department of Education, this was the first time that we had heard about DOJ trying to essentially infiltrate or invade a New York City-based nonprofit. Props to the Vera Institute for standing up strong and saying, no effing way, especially if you froze our money. We don't even have any federal funding that you could use to require us to obey. So props to them. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security and congressional investigators have been looking at the Chinese American Planning Council and threatening them for basically providing guidance and information to immigrants in New York City and trying to suggest and investigate that they might be subject to criminal investigation simply for providing information to immigrant New Yorkers. Unfortunately, more and more of that seems likely to happen. We've got a great network of nonprofits in New York City, and we need to stand together in solidarity to protect them. So one hero here worth pointing out, I mentioned her before, is New York State Attorney General Letitia James. She's actually launching a new effort to support nonprofits who are navigating funding cuts or facing investigations and who might not have a lawyer as good as the New York State Attorney General on call to help out. So they're doing an April 28th webinar that we list in the PowerPoint, and I recommend any nonprofits here or watching to sign up and join her in that effort. Okay, and then finally, I'm just going to tick through a list here of some other things that we're busy watching in the Controller's office that are related. First, there is a quarterly earnings report coming out, I think later today, in any case shortly. My office continues to monitor the ongoing board issues at Tesla and the unfettered control Elon Musk continues to play in the administration. As I continue, and I reiterate today, my call on the Adams administration law department to sue Tesla for securities fraud, essentially. We have long been holders of Tesla, and before the last few months, that has been a place where a climate solutions investment has been growing. Developing and selling EVs is part of the climate transition we want to see. But Musk now has both abandoned the company, so it has no CEO, and worked directly against the company's interests by promoting policies that go against electric vehicles. So I am reiterating my call to the law department, to Deputy Mayor Randy Mastro, and to the mayor not to give in to their Trumpian instincts, but instead to go into court and sue Tesla on behalf of our stock, both to demand a full-time CEO that is not Elon Musk and genuine independent board governance that gets back to the business of selling EVs and growing them across the country. If that doesn't happen, we will consider recommending to the boards that we dump our Tesla stock. But I do just want to say, like, the reason that we haven't jumped to recommend divestment is that it would be better if Tesla could be preserved as a company that did make and sell EVs, and it owes that to its shareholders. So shareholder litigation here has a chance of getting rid of Musk as CEO, of winning genuinely independent board governance ordered by a court on behalf of their duties to shareholders, and we should try that. So we need the law department to do it. We can't do it from here directly. If they will, great. Maybe we can make progress at saving EVs and getting rid of Musk's leadership. If not, then I will recommend dumping the stock. Last week, we hosted a briefing highlighting the potentially negative impacts of Trump's tariffs, and we continue to monitor that, and we'll be continuing to produce economic reports out of this office. Certainly related to climate is, we've got an unfortunate another update on congestion pricing. Yesterday, U.S. Secretary Duffy reiterated his threat to pull federal transportation funding if the MTA does not turn off the cameras. I do here want to praise Governor Hochul and MTA chair leader for standing up yesterday and making clear the cameras are staying on. We're not afraid of these threats. We are owed our federal transportation formula funding. We're going to keep the cameras on, and if they take money that we're entitled to, the state or the MTA will go into court to get it back. I joined last Friday CFPB workers who were laid off for the second time. They were fired, the court ordered their reinstatement, and then they were fired again, and then a second time last Friday, the court ordered their reinstatement, and I was proud to join them. We'll be standing with federal workers in New York City. In this case, federal workers who have saved Americans $21 billion that were taken from them through predatory lending and corporate greed. So that's one other thing we're watching. We've talked a couple of times about deportations, and of course several of them have been of New Yorkers. Yesterday, Mahmoud Khalil's son was born, and instead of being able to be there with his wife at the birth of his son in New York City, he is imprisoned. And that is a human rights violation that our government is enacting on a New Yorker, and it's important that we call it out. Similarly, over the weekend, I got to meet an Israeli Columbia student named Josh Drill, who is a friend of Mohsen Madawi's. They are partners in Israeli-Palestinian dialogue and peacemaking. And I have to say, before I got to talk to Josh on Sunday, I was angry on Mohsen's behalf generically, because you can't deny due process and shred the Constitution. Having gotten to hear from Josh about his friend, I'm angry specifically. This is someone who, even though he lives in Vermont, goes to school at Columbia, is our neighbor, is clearly someone who is a bridge builder, and it's important for all of us to recognize that's a harm to New York, not only a harm to constitutional democracy, and we're going to keep calling it out. You may have seen that last night on Truth Social, Donald Trump said, just right out there in public, we can't bother with due process because giving everyone, an investigation and a trial, I think he said, would take 200 or 300 years. That is the president we're dealing with, who has so much contempt for, so little respect for the basic principles of constitutional democracy and due process, who yucked it up with Bukele at the idea of sending citizens to torture in foreign prisons. Too many of them are New Yorkers, and we're going to keep calling it out. I'll skip over budget cuts because there's so much there and we don't have a lot of new information, but I actually do want to make one final point here on student loans, because unfortunately the federal government under the Trump administration has now ended the moratorium on student loans. We did a look at this back in August of 2024, a spotlight looking on elevated household debt. We focused especially on credit card and car loans, and what we found is households with stress, we're seeing more defaults and financial stress, and no surprise, but even with the moratorium in place, households with student debt were experiencing more stress and more risks of default on their car loans and their credit card loans. Even before the moratorium ended, that uptick was taking place last spring and summer. And with the moratorium ending and debt being expected again for students, we fear a really significant uptick in defaults, financial stress, and bankruptcy for New Yorkers with student loans. So we're calling that out today, and we'll be continuing research to look at it in the future. With that, let me say thank you very much to everybody who turned out today. Thank you to my team for pulling all this information together. We're going to keep doing these briefings weekly. We've put out a lot of information, as I pointed to the website link, but now with the threats and risks just coming more fast and furious, every week we'll get up here and look at what has happened over the last week, what are its impacts specifically on New Yorkers, which New Yorkers, like the ones in this room, are standing up and pushing back and doing something about it, what can we do from this office, what can New York City do to stand up. These are critical times. This is an emergency. It's a climate emergency, it's a democracy emergency, and you ought to be able to expect that your leaders will act like it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we'll be glad to take some questions.
Yeah, we'll take on topic first.
What was the topic? We went out a lot of topics here.
I think we're going to talk about either Trump or
All right.
yes, pretty control spectrum.
Yeah, soon you.
Hi, I have talked to your SMU student at Rock about the plan and what has been their response so far.
Well, we're in dialogue. So I guess I'll just say, we have about 300 asset managers. How many of them in public markets? 80 public markets asset managers. We are in obviously constant dialogue with them. You know, they were made aware of the June 2025 deadline back at the end of 2022. We've been in a lot of back and forth with them. We do due diligence all the time. What's happening today, and so, you know, they have different points of view. Some of them have actually really, you know, take this really seriously and have not backed down. Some of them used to take it seriously but have taken big steps backward, and certainly BlackRock is one of those that at one point Larry Fink himself was saying climate risk is financial risk. They were voting their proxies and doing active engagement in the direction of decarbonization. Over the last year, they withdrew from Climate Action 100 Plus in North America. They withdrew from the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance. They stopped voting their shares in favor of climate action. We have certainly let them know at each of those points how displeased we were about that, sometimes myself directly to him and often our investment and due diligence staff to them. Today, we are for the first time well, and I will say, of the standards, today we're clarifying the standards that we'll be judging those plans by, both publicly and by sending them to every one of our managers. That'll give us some additional time for back and forth and dialogue between now and June 30th, making clear to them, these are the standards that we have. We expect you to submit a plan. If we expect you to submit a plan that complies with these standards, I am confident that many of our asset managers will submit plans that are timely and compliant with these standards. If folks have questions, if our asset managers have questions about something, we'll of course be glad to engage in dialogue with them before June 30th. If they say, you know, here's a particular policy, do you view this as compliant with standards? We'll be glad to engage in dialogue with them. But we are clear that if we don't get them by June 30th, and if they aren't up to these standards, and it'll take some time to review and benchmark them against each other, we will then bring recommendations forward to the board that their mandates be bid out.
Just to follow up, how would that affect your return?
Well, I mean, we have 80, and so part of what we do, I mean, first, everything we are doing here, you know, fiduciary duty comes first, and in every step of our plan, we're really clear our core responsibility is to our beneficiaries to deliver top-tier returns. I'll note that last year, you know, our FY24 returns were 10%. That outperformed CalPERS and CalSTRS and many other of our peers, even after we had already effectuated our fossil fuel divestment. We were sued over that fossil fuel divestment, and because it sits on strong, you know, legal ground and with attention to fiduciary duty and with a real thorough research before we did it, that case was dismissed, and I'm confident at any appeal level it will continue to be upheld. So we take that very seriously, and of course we're looking at getting the top asset manager returns that we can. We are clear that climate risk is financial risk, and that by taking the standards that we laid out here, you can deliver top-tier returns with bold climate action simultaneously. We'll keep working to get the firefighters and the police pension fund to join NYCERS, BRRS, and the teachers' retirement system in climate action. The boards are independent. You know, each one of those boards is comprised of 50% labor trustees, 50% city trustees, and to take any actions, to make an individual investment, to adopt a new policy, to bring a shareholder resolution, takes majority of the board. You know, we have good and, you know, real good and productive dialogue with the fire and the police trustees, and they make the decisions that they believe, you know, best on behalf of their members. And so they, I will say, have made many investments in climate solutions where they see opportunities for, you know, for a good investment and good returns. So generally our climate solutions investments are pro rata across the 5 funds. Those 2 funds have not yet set net zero goals or divested, and I will certainly continue to engage with their trustees in the hopes that they do. I mean, this referral is of grave concern. When we've long known that Andrew Cuomo is a serial harasser and liar. This is someone who harassed at least 11 women and has continued to lie about it. He, at the time of his resignation, seemed to acknowledge harmful behavior, but now he says it's just all political. He was either lying then or lying now. We know that he personally, from his own aide, marked up the New York State Department of Health report, forcing the Department of Health to undercount the COVID deaths during the pandemic. So that's lying to the public, lying to the families and loved ones of people that he sent into those nursing homes. And then last year, he lied to Congress about it, and his testimony was contradicted by a former staffer. So this is someone who lies over and over and over again. Meanwhile, he's failed to stand up to Trump on almost anything. Didn't stand up when Elon Musk stole $80 million. Didn't stand up when Trump cut those emergency housing vouchers that are going to make 8,000 New Yorkers homeless. Hasn't stood up about cuts to the VA or the Department of Education. So here you've got someone with like a history of corruption, a history of abuse, a history of lying, and a history of failing to stand up to Donald Trump. And now it's being referred from Congress to the Justice Department that he perjured himself before Congress. New Yorkers are tired of corruption. They're tired of lying from City Hall. They're tired of a mayor who kowtows to Donald Trump. And New Yorkers should therefore be very concerned, have grave concerns about what this referral about Governor Cuomo could portend. We do not want a mayor with a history of lying, with a history of corruption, and with a history of kowtowing to Donald Trump.
Yes, Jack.
So, on that point, you trust the congressional MAGA Republicans that are trying to do a political hit against Andrew Cuomo with the Trump administration here, or do you not see it as that?
I mean, I don't trust congressional MAGA Republicans one way or another, no, but I just don't think that's the issue here. I mean, the issue here is we have a mayoral candidate with a history of corruption, abuse, lying, and now failing to stand up to Trump and protect New Yorkers. And, you know, I think New Yorkers are just exhausted from Adams' administration, abuse, corruption, lying, and failing to stand up to the Trump administration. And if we want to turn the page, if we want a mayor who's honest, who doesn't have a history of lying, if we want a mayor who doesn't have a history of abuse, if we want a mayor who will stand up and fight to protect New Yorkers from Donald Trump, then it is just eminently clear that is not Andrew Cuomo.
And speaking of Eric Adams, earlier today at his press conference, he criticized you directly by name, saying that you
Published a report that had data in it about how much money was going to community and ethnic media based on the administration's own numbers.
he might have also done that.
Oh, no, that's not what he's been, no? Oh, all right. That was yesterday maybe then, okay.
Shying away from Israeli investment, saying you're doing so for political reasons.
So there are more investments in Israeli companies now than there were when I took office. We can get you the exact numbers, but it's grown from about 300 million to about 400 million. That's an increase in investment, not divestment. Eric Adams lies about a lot of things, so it wouldn't surprise me that this is one of them.
And did you input a policy in your controller administration against foreign sovereign debt, or did that predate this year?
It has been the practice of New York City pension funds going far back prior to my administration that we don't directly invest in foreign sovereign debt. And I continued that policy.
In the last 3 or 4 years, New York State has had some very high-profile climate including the Suez Canal. And Trump's response has indicated that is one going to do oil and gas because we're going to target that law, state law. So how can we protect them so that we just look up?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things that we highlighted is they're going after state and local action. I mean, this is why I a couple of times here praised Attorney General Tish James. I think she's in the best spot to figure out where and how we defend state laws and policies against federal overreach. Obviously, that kind of federal to state and even to city preemption can be pretty technical. It's clear some of the things Trump is doing are just unconstitutional, and it's worth going into court asserting 10th Amendment rights for New York State. If they make specific allegations, the federal government, that something conflicts, obviously you have to then dig in and take it seriously. But look, we know on congestion pricing, for example, they have no legal ground to stand on. The judge already ruled that the federal government properly approved it. I think the Superfund Act and the CLCPA are on strong legal ground, and that the state will need to go into court to assert our rights. It won't surprise me if, like, Trump comes after the things we're doing today. The lawsuit that was against our divestment was by people who are allies with other MAGA actors. But again, what's important is both to defend past actions and then just keep pushing forward on bold new actions. It is always important to make sure you're on solid legal ground. And look, that's been one of the things that's been a dialogue between our office and advocates on the policy we're announcing today. Like, we work really hard to make sure when we take steps, we ground them on solid legal grounding. So if and when we have to go into court to defend them, we're in a strong position to do so. But I really think this is both, like, activists out in the streets demanding, lawsuits fighting back, and then agencies and legislatures and pension fund investment leaders taking bold next steps so that we're just clear we are not backing down, we're pushing forward. All right.
Any other off-topic?
That's fine. Go ahead. No, we'll take Lena's. Lena spoke. We'll give her a question. So. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you all very much.